Here on our brand new farm in North Wales, we are turning this currently empty field into our brand new vegetable garden. So we've been trying to work out the best way to do this, so I'm going to take you through why I've done what I've done so far and what my plans are for the future. Okay, so this is a brand new space for me, so I'm going to try some different things and see what works best. So my experience is I have come here from inner city, completely patioed garden, so my experience includes container gardening, and we built some raised beds directly on the patio. So having actual in-ground space is brand new to me, and I am very, very excited. This field that we're going to be working in, which is from the... no, hang on, I'll show you. This field here, so as far as... where it is, this fence line. So I have loose plans for the field behind, but I don't think we're going to need the space. So up to that line, then down to that hedgerow, as you can see, and then all the way around to that hedgerow. So that field is about 1/4 of an acre, which is about 1,000 square meters, which is a bloody big space. We're only 2 people, and I'm planning to fill it with many vegetables as I can, so it's, you know, it's loads of space to work with. So I'm not going to be cramming everything into a smaller space as possible. I'm going to use the space and try some different things and see how we go. So this is my first year here, so rather than make any sort of permanent decisions, I'm going to try some different things and learn as I go. So that leads me directly on to my first consideration about whether or not to go with raised beds or in-ground beds, and that is flexibility. I fully expect to make some silly decisions when it comes to what I put where. As I say, this is all new to me. We're not from this area. There's a lot of change from the experience that I have, so I know that the odds of me putting everything in exactly the right place for the next decade is really, really tiny. So chances are I'm going to want to move things, I'm going to learn lessons, I want to change things around. So potentially the idea of putting in raised beds might be a bit premature at this stage, and perhaps the idea of in-ground beds is a bit more flexible for the next few years as I learn and want to change things. My next consideration in deciding between in-ground beds and raised beds is the price. In the old house we had raised bed borders put along the edges of the garden. They were probably about 6 meters long, and they went up against the bordering walls. So that was on a relatively small scale, and it still cost hundreds of pounds between the wood to actually build them and then the topsoil and the compost to fill them. It's not a cheap thing to do, and that was on a relatively small scale. So whatever we built them out of here, be it wood, metal or whatever, if you're going to fill 1/4 of an acre with raised beds, it's going to get a bit pricey. Obviously in our old house we didn't have the option. We were on patio, so it was pots and, you know, raised beds. But here I've got 1/4 of an acre of relatively flat, relatively good soil, and I think I might just use it. I should say that doesn't mean that I'm not going to need compost and things like that, but we're talking on a different scale if I'm having to fill sort of a foot depth of a bed. See what I mean? I am by no means expecting this to be a cheap endeavour. At the end of the day, starting from a completely empty field to get to the point of it being 1/4 of an acre full of productive gardens, it's going to cost some money. But I need to start, you know, I really need to think about what I've already got here, what I've already got to use, what resources I have available to me that aren't going to break their bank, because ultimately I don't have thousands to be thrown in to getting a garden started in the first year. That's just not going to happen. So I'm thinking about what I've already got. What I've already got is some pretty good quality soil as it stands. A little bit of background here: this was an equestrian property. It's not been used for horses for at least 5 years, and it was completely overgrown. So when we moved in, one of the local farmers came and completely flattened it for us, but the field was mostly grass, nettles, thistles and dock, so it is weedy, but underneath all of that it's reasonable soil to work with, and it drains quite well because we're quite high up. So I think I've got a good foundation here. Other things I've got at my disposal is pretty much infinite horse muck, which is nice, from my neighbours. They've got their own horses, they feed them off of their own land, off of their own hay, which they grow and don't spray, so I know where it's all coming from. So I think if I've already got that availability and I've got the space and I've got lots of potential for making my own compost here, that actually I could get started out here without buying anything. And I think that's where my head is at the moment. Potentially further down the road, once I know exactly what I want and I start to sort of transform it into something a bit more permanent, then maybe I'll consider raised beds. But I think for now, the cost itself is too what's the word? So this way I feel like all I need actually is a bit of my own effort to get started, and that feels pretty cool. So I've saved every bit of cardboard that we've had since the move. Small bits have gone into the compost and big bits are ready in the potting shed for my no-dig beds. Why no-dig? All the usual reasons. I'll link to a blog post if I've written all about it, but it's going to be no-dig. Okay, so there's a couple of beds already in there, so let me show you what I've already done and why, and then we'll have a little chat about my plans following on from that. These are the first beds that I put in. When I first put them in, they did not have these wooden borders, so I'll tell you about that in a second. It's just a thick layer of cardboard with a layer of horse muck and some grass clippings. So I first did this a couple of months ago, and as you can see, there's nothing except for some weeds in here at the moment, so I'm just leaving these over winter just to finish breaking down whatever's in there. Now the reason that we added these borders, I actually found it really difficult to keep a proper edge. As you can see, it's all grass in between, and so to stop the grass from just taking over, this is quite a windy site where I am here, so it's not like you put the compost on and it stays where you put it. Everything gets a bit blown around, so where the wind was sort of picking up bits of the horse muck and the compost, that was just sort of creating a hyper fertile barrier for the grass and the weeds to creep back in. So that's why I ended up putting these borders on. I didn't want to do borders in the first place because that was one of the worst parts about having the raised beds in the old garden, was that they were just a slug haven. You know, it's unfair to say that it was completely the fault of the borders. You know, realistically, we were in a city, it was a walled garden, completely patio, there was no natural environment for any natural predators or anything like that, so it's a bit of a different situation here. But nonetheless, I wasn't planning on putting any borders in, and yet here we have borders just to try and keep a sort of definite line. I think keeping a proper border between grass and the no-dig beds, I think the only way to do that without a border will be to sort of really mound them up so that there's a height difference, or to potentially edge out a border in the grass so that it's lower and then mound up in the middle. And that's one of the things I'm going to try. So this bit is an example of what I mean. So there was sort of a layer of cardboard along this edge that didn't have any compost on it, and then the compost sort of started here. But where the cardboard has disintegrated over the last couple of months, there was no sort of obvious border between the two, and the grass has just crept back in. So I've since added these borders, and then I plan to sort of start again a little bit with these and obscure it with some more cardboard, and we'll see how that goes. Since we're out here, take a quick peek at the garlic. This is the first thing to actually get planted here. I planted it, I think, beginning of November. And again, it didn't have the wooden borders when I first put it in. Then I quickly learned that everything was just going to blow away. So not only are these wooden edges keeping a sort of line between the grass and the bed, they're also stopping wind from getting up under the cardboard and lifting the whole lot away. Hopefully I won't have to keep these borders the whole time, and once the bed is more established I'll be able to sort of build it up and keep an edge here, but time will tell. As a side note, I was quite fortunate that these wooden bits were left by the previous owner. They were all kind of buried into the undergrowth and into the brambles and things. There's like a whole set of old fencing and old horse jumps and things like that, so that's what I'm actually using out here. This has all just been bits of wood that I found lying around the land, so at least it's not something I had to go pay for. another means of me trying to establish beds on the cheap out here. As you can see, this is just an old tarp. It's a bit of thick plastic that I've tried to sort of weigh down with more of those bits of leftover wood, just to try and get rid of a patch of this grass so that I will be able to plant directly into the ground come spring. This may well turn into my potato patch, maybe corn. We shall see, but I'll see how this goes. It's been a bit of a challenge actually keeping it on the ground. As I say, catch quite a lot of wind across this valley. We'll see how it goes. So as I say, I really don't love the idea of having wooden borders on all of my beds. A, because it just seems like a pest haven, and B, because I don't have enough and I don't want to go buying it. I think the biggest challenge with these in-ground beds is the grass in between them. A potential solution for that, I suppose, is for me to sort of wood chip everything around the paths. But I would quite like to attempt to keep the grass paths. That might be naive and futile, but I'm going to give it a go for this year at least. But if I want to keep the grass in between the beds and stop it from taking over the beds, then I need a plan, and I'm trying something here. So as I said, I'm doing no dig beds, so I'm not planning to sort of churn up any of this grass. So I'm kind of trying to find a happy medium between a sort of edged traditional grass edge bed and a no dig bed. So I don't know if you can see behind me, there's a little hole here where I'm going to try just digging out the border. So you were going to put an actual sort of edged bed in. I'll put a picture of what I mean. That, but without digging out the whole bed. So I will just dig the edge out and then inside that do a traditional no dig bed. I don't actually know if that's going to work, but it's one of the things I would like to try because it sounds like a potential way for me to keep the grass paths and in between, but be able to keep a bed clear of grass without a border. So here I'm continuing with the bed that I just started. I'm using an old fence post, firstly to keep the line nice and straight and where I want it, and secondly I'm using it for a little bit of leverage when I pull the shovel backwards. It means I can use the corner of the shovel to dig straight down perpendicular to the ground and get a nice clean edge, and then lean the shovel back into the wood so I don't mush up the grass edge as I pull the shovel back. So I'm pushing the shovel in about 10 centimetres deep. I know you can get a proper edging tool for this. I just wanted to see if I could do it with just a bog standard shovel, because I don't even know if it's going to work. So I want to see how it goes before I make any investments on new tools. It did work quite well, but there are some chunky roots in there that I did struggle with a bit. I did go back round after and tidy up the edges and make sure the edge was as straight down as I could get it. For the best chance of stopping the grass from growing back into this bed, I need there to be a sort of proper drop in the height there. You can see me standing on the wood as I pull the shovel back just to stop it from more shifting when I put the weight onto it. I then used a rake to try and level this bit out a bit, because there were some big chunks of grass along the inside edge of that bed, which was easier said than done, as they were serious lumps. I probably should have taken the grass clumps out of the area completely to leave a completely level area, but I didn't, so next time. This would definitely have been helpful in laying the cardboard to occlude the light from the grass underneath, because as you can see there's definitely going to be some serious gaps, just because of how unlevel that bed is. Lesson learned. So on goes the cardboard, and I'm using some bits of wood and full compost bags to weigh it down. I need to do another manure run next door to layer on top of this, and then I'll top it with some leaf mould from the trees that fell here last year. I'll then leave it over the rest of this winter and top it with some compost, either our own if it's ready or bought in if I have to when I come to plant in it in spring. So the wood in the compost bags are just temporary until I can pop next door and pinch some more horse muck. I realise I have butchered
no dig a bit here, but most of the bed is still undug, so I hope that the no dig purists aren't going to be too upset with me. I'll add some more cardboard to make sure it's all well covered when I come back with the manure as well. The grass edge looks pretty good, so I am hopeful that this will work.
So these beds really are just the beginning. It's only the 2nd of January now as I'm filming this, so I've got a good few months until I'm going to want to be putting stuff out into these beds. So I figure the more I can get done and in the ground now, the longer they've got for that cardboard to smother out the grass underneath, and it'll be all the better come spring. So I'm going to prepare as many of these as I possibly can before spring comes. Hopefully fill out the majority of this bed so that it's all ready when spring comes around. So I will update you on how those dugout edges go, along with the bordered no dig beds, and I'll keep you up to date. So if you do want to know, you better subscribe. Also do updates as to how the garden goes as we go. So I will post a video. I'll also post a video very soon about my plans for what's actually going to be growing in here, and we'll go through the mountain of seeds that I've got for this space.
I am so excited to see how this view is going to change over the years here. Thank you for joining me. Have a good one.